Hey everyone, tonight we're starting with something a little darker. A time of plagues, punishments, and pottage. We're diving into what life was really like during the Middle Ages. Forget the castles and chivalry Hollywood sold you. The truth is, you probably wouldn't last a single day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1325. The good news is, you're alive. The bad news is, so are the fleet. Your bed is a half-rotted straw mattress stuffed with bugs and hay that smells like a barn floor. Because it was a barn floor 3 months ago. There's no memory foam, no pillows, and definitely no Egyptian cotton sheets. Just a wool blanket that hasn't been washed since last winter and now weighs roughly as much as a small cow from the accumulated grime. You blink awake as the church bell clangs in the distance. It's the medieval version of an alarm clock, only louder and somehow even less merciful. Your home is a wooden hut with one room, no windows, and a charming open-concept floor plan where your family, livestock, and domestic insects all share the same space. The smell, oh, it's a fragrant symphony, a subtle blend of stale beer, human sweat, goat, and something you pray isn't mold. But no, in your soul probably is. Scented candles haven't been invented, and even if they were, they'd just melt on your dirt floor. You try to stretch, but immediately regret it because the air is freezing and your joints ache. You're 22 years old, which in medieval terms is roughly middle age. Your spine creaks like an old wooden door, and your knees sound like a bag of rocks being shaken by a confused peasant. Getting out of bed is a gamble. The floor is either wet from last night's rain, which leaks through the thatched roof, or crusty from something your neighbor's chicken did. Either way, your bare feet are now part of the ecosystem. Oh, and privacy? What's that? Your entire family, and maybe a random cousin who just never left, are waking up beside you. There's no bedroom, no curtains, no me time, just communal everything. Welcome to morning in medieval Europe, where you're never truly alone because parasites, rodents, and 8 other people are always with you. And this is just how your day starts. It only gets worse from here. The call of nature. So, you've managed to crawl out of your medieval haystack of horrors. Congrats. Now, nature calls, and it's not calling politely. It's screaming. Here's the part where you start missing the modern bathroom. There's no toilet, no seat, no toilet paper, no flush, not even a mildly resentful plunger in the corner. In the 14th century, relieving yourself is an adventure, a social experiment, and often a small public event. If you're a peasant, your bathroom is likely a wooden bucket behind the house, which is already full because Uncle Wolfstan had a rough night after eating bad turnips. The smell is biblical. You hold your breath, do your business, and then here's the kicker. Toss it into the street. Yes, the street. You're supposed to shout something like, "Gardez-vous," before dumping it out the window. That's old French for, watch out below, although, frankly, no one ever moves fast enough. Streets in medieval towns are open sewers, a charming river of human waste, animal droppings, and mystery liquids you'd rather not examine. If you're lucky enough to live in a town with public latrines. Congratulations, you get to sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers in an outhouse where privacy is a myth and ventilation is a cruel joke. You might make small talk, but try not to breathe too deeply. Toilet paper? Never heard of it. Most people wipe with straw, leaves, rags, moss, or if they're feeling especially indulgent, a scrap of wool, sometimes nothing at all, which might explain why handshakes weren't popular yet. And if you're in a castle, surely it's better, right? Well, sort of. You might have a garderobe, a hole in the wall that drops your waist directly into the moat. Great idea, except that your enemies know this. And yes, attackers sometimes climbed in through the waist chute. Talk about entering through the back door. So whether you're a farmer or a baron, medieval toileting is a humiliation ritual. It's cold, it's public, it's dangerous, and it's never not disgusting. One slip on a wet stone path and you're face first in humanity's leftovers. And you still haven't brushed your teeth. But we'll get to that next. Certainly, here is the revised and expanded version of the A Feast of Misery segment. Now in English. A feast of misery. You survived the toilet. You deserve a reward, right? Maybe a nice breakfast. Something warm, delicious, comforting. Sorry, this is medieval Europe. Nothing is comforting here. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a grim and miserable affair. There are no eggs Benedict, no sputtering electric coffee machines, and certainly no avocado toast or lattes. Welcome to your daily ration of pottage. Pottage isn't a meal, it's a lesson in endurance. It's a thick, congealed stew made from whatever you can find. grains, root vegetables, maybe a few beans if you're lucky. But its primary ingredients are time and despair. It's been simmering in the same blackened pot for days, sometimes weeks, with new ingredients simply dumped on top of the old without a second thought. It's less of a recipe and more of an ongoing edible experiment. A place where life and death coexist. On the side, a hunk of bread so hard it could be used as a weapon to deflect arrows or bash an enemy. It's made from coarse rye or barley flour, often bulked up with sawdust, ground up acorns, or other creative ingredients only found during a bad harvest. Soft, white wheat is a noble's fantasy. This loaf is not your friend. You can't slice it with a knife. You have to use all your strength to tear it or smash it against a rock. What about drinks? You're not sipping orange juice or a glass of milk. You're drinking beer. Yes, beer. At 6 a.m. Why? Because the only fresh water stream flowing through the town is teeming with parasites and filth from every household. As unbelievable as it sounds, beer is the safest option. You start your day with weak ale, low alcohol content, just enough to kill bacteria and ensure your survival. Children drink it too, as it's the only way they won't die immediately after drinking water. Want some meat or cheese? Dream on. Meat is reserved for feast days, and only if your lord is feeling generous. Most peasants don't eat meat more than a few times a year. As for fresh fruit, it's only available when in season and hasn't already fermented into wine. And don't even think about spices unless you're royalty. A pinch of pepper costs more than your monthly wages. Salt is valuable enough to be locked away in a box with a key. So you chew your gritty bread, gulp your medieval beer, and try not to think about the rat that may have scurried across your bowl of pottage during the night. Breakfast doesn't energize you. It's simply a ritual for survival. Here is the revised and expanded version of the Wardrobe of Woe segment. Now in English, the Wardrobe of Woe. So, you've eaten your sad medieval breakfast and now it's time to get dressed. Not that it'll help. Your wardrobe consists of exactly one outfit. One single outfit is all you possess. It's a rough wool tunic or a scratchy linen shift that you've worn every single day. Every single hour. For months, possibly years. There's no such thing as seasonal fashion. There's only one rule. Wear this until it disintegrates. Or until it gives you a horrible fungal infection. Underwear? Optional. If you're lucky. Maybe you have a linen under tunic. If not, you're going commando beneath layers of itchy, sweaty wool, all, lovingly, stitched together by someone who probably had no idea what a proper seam was supposed to look like. Of course, there's no washing machine, no soap, and absolutely no dry cleaner in sight. So, your clothes are stained, stiff, and emit a foul odor, like a compost pile that's been left to marinate in a pigsty. And even if you wanted to wash them, it's an incredibly difficult task. You'd have to haul water from a river or well, heat it over a fire, scrub your tunic on a washboard with ashes or lye, and then hang it to dry in the sun, which only appears for about 3 days a year. And don't even get me started on shoes. If you own any, they're made of untreated leather, barely stitched together, and offer as much arch support as a banana peel. Most peasants just go barefoot, through thick mud, through animal dung, and through medieval landmines, aka sharp rocks and disease-ridden puddles. All of this points to one simple truth: your skin hates you. You itch constantly. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs live rent-free on your body. Everyone has them. Nobles, lousy, monks, itchy, children, walking insect farms. No one escapes. You can scratch your armpit with a wooden spoon while chatting with the local priest. And no one will even bat an eye. Your skin is raw from constant rubbing. Your scalp is a battlefield of bites. And if you develop a rash, well, too bad. There's no dermatologist, no hydrocortisone, no one to tell you it's probably scabies. You just keep on suffering in silence. And if you're lucky enough to not get an infection, great, that rash will simply accompany you for the next 6 months like an unwanted medieval sidekick. Now that you're dressed in misery and wrapped in discomfort, it's time to head outside and start working yourself to death. The dental dilemma. Now that you're dressed in itches and damp wool, it's time to flash that morning smile. Except you don't, because in the Middle Ages, smiling is a dangerous game. Not emotionally, dentally. There's no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no mouthwash, and, of course, no floss. The concept of oral hygiene is a foreign luxury, as rare as bathing. Some people might chew on a twig or varins with wine or vinegar. But for the most part, your teeth are left entirely to their own devices, and they are not faring well at all. Sugar, while not yet ubiquitous, is becoming more common among the rich. Imported at immense cost, it's used mostly in small cakes to flaunt wealth. If you're a noble, congratulations, you get to rot your teeth faster than the peasants. If you're poor, you'll do it slowly over time with fermented bread, gritty porridge, and years of hard chewing on rock-solid food. Toothaches? Get used to them. The pain is a constant, unwelcome companion. Much like the medieval weather, it's always there in the background. It's the kind of pain that makes you want to get on your knees and pray. Drink yourself into a stupor. or yank the tooth out yourself with a rusty pair of pliers. And that's not a joke. That was the actual, common treatment. Dentists didn't truly exist, but barber surgeons did. Yes, the same guy who cuts your hair is also the one pulling your molars by candlelight with an iron hook and zero anesthesia. Infected tooth? Hope you enjoy fevers, because without antibiotics, the infection can easily turn into sepsis and kill you from a simple toothache. That's right, the same thing that sends us to a pharmacy today could be the cause of your funeral in the 1300s, and there's no relief on the social front either. Kissing, good luck, halitosis, or bad breath, is everywhere. It's a signature of the era. If you're single, you're not judged by your smile but by the land and livestock you own. In short, your mouth is a battlefield, and it's losing the war. Now that your teeth are throbbing, let's head outside because your real job, the one that will break your back, is just getting started. A life of labor. It's time for work, but forget everything you know about a job. There's no office, no desk, no coffee breaks, and absolutely no chance of a promotion. If you're like 90% of the population, your job is simple. Don't die while laboring for someone else's comfort. You're a peasant. Congratulations. That means you work the land that belongs to a lord who probably doesn't even remember your name. You rise with the sun, a cold and unforgiving light, and you stop only when it finally disappears behind the trees. Your tools? A wooden hoe, a rusty sickle, and whatever bones are still intact in your body. There's no weekend, no clocking out, no counting down the minutes until quitting time. There is only sunrise to sunset. 6 days a week. Sunday is your only respite, and that's only if you're not harvesting, fighting off raiders, or praying feverishly for your infected toe to stop turning black. The work is brutal, a relentless assault on your body. Fields are plowed by hand, or with a lumbering ox if your family is rich enough to afford one. You dig ditches, sow seeds, pull weeds, and carry water until your spine begins to resemble the letter S. No one cares if you're tired. No one's asking how your mental health is doing. There is no sick leave or paid time off. If you're a woman, surprise, your work doesn't stop in the fields. You also care for children. Clean, cook, spin wool, feed animals, and pretend your husband's lice infestation isn't slowly migrating to your side of the bed. Children start helping out around age 5. No school, no toys. Just a tiny wooden rake and a dream of one day not dying of the flu. And if you're one of the few who isn't a farmer, maybe a blacksmith, a tanner, or a cooper, great. You still work with fire, noxious chemicals, or animal guts all day in poorly ventilated sheds. The pay? Basically survival. The perks? Occasional bleeding. Break a bone? Too bad. Get a fever? Drink some warm beer and keep going. You can't afford to stop. Not even for a single day. Because if you don't work, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, well, medieval Europe has a solution for that. You're simply replaced. So, you grip your shovel, ignore the blisters, and keep digging. Because in the Middle Ages, your job isn't a career. It's a slow-motion endurance test. Climate. The sky's scourge. Now that your back is on fire from a day of endless labor. Let's talk about the weather. In the Middle Ages, the temperature wasn't about seasons, it was about the sky's ongoing personal punishment. Let's start with winter, a season of bone-chilling misery. Your home is not a sanctuary, it's a glorified wooden box. There's no insulation, no central heating, and no waterproofing, just rough-hewn walls with gaps so wide you could throw a chicken through them. Your windows, if you even have one, are covered with a thin piece of oiled cloth or a stretched animal bladder. Not glass. The fire in the hearth is nice in theory, but you don't have enough firewood to keep it going through the night because wood is a precious, expensive commodity. Gathering it from the Lord's forest can be a capital offense, yes. You could be executed for picking up the wrong stick. You bundle up in your one damp wool tunic, a garment as cold as it is smelly, and huddle near the dying embers. Still, you wake up with your nose frozen and your feet permanently cold and often damp. Your fingers are so stiff they feel like tiny medieval popsicles. Frostbite isn't a medical condition, it's just called bad luck. Now, fast forward to summer. Sounds better, right? Wrong. In summer, your home transforms into a clay oven. There's no fan, no cross breeze, and absolutely no deodorant. You sweat through your layers of wool, but you can't remove them because showing too much skin is scandalous and invites sunburn, insect bites, and social judgment. The air hangs thick and heavy with the combined smells of unwashed bodies and last week's goat stew, which is still fermenting in the corner. Flies are out in full force, a buzzing black cloud attracted to your unwashed body. Mosquitoes buzz relentlessly by your ear while you sleep, assuming you can sleep through the sound of your neighbors yelling and babies crying. In the fields, the sun bakes you. There's no sunblock, no hat unless you fashioned one out of straw like a desperate scarecrow. And the worst part of it all? You still have to work. Heat stroke is just called taking a bad turn. So, you're either shivering in your own hovel, wondering if your toes will make it to spring, or you're sweating through your only pair of socks while your thighs chafe into oblivion. And the one thing that never changes, no matter the season, your clothes still itch, your food is still terrible, and your next job is still waiting. Water. The silent killer. Feeling thirsty? Need to freshen up? Want to splash a little water on your face to wake up from this damp fever dream of a life? Too bad. In medieval times, water isn't your friend, it's trying to murder you quietly. Let's start with drinking. The nearby stream looks fresh, bubbling, and clear, like something out of a fantasy movie. But spoiler alert, it's not. Upstream, someone just dumped a chamber pot into it. And if not that, then a dead pig is probably decomposing in it. Parasites, bacteria, and the entire microbial army of medieval Europe are waiting in every sip. That's why people drank beer, yes, beer, even children. But before you imagine medieval kids doing keg stands, understand that it was small beer, weak in alcohol, but strong in survival. Brewing boiled the water, making it safer than whatever flowed through the town ditch. Wine was another option if you were rich enough to afford it and unconcerned with functioning properly before noon. What about bathing? Surely water was used for cleaning. In theory, yes. In practice, absolutely not. See, back then, people believed bathing actually opened your pores and let the disease in. That's right, washing yourself was considered medically risky. You were cleaner, apparently, if you never removed the protective layer of filth caked onto your skin. Communal bathhouses did exist, but they quickly gained reputations as places for gossip, scandal, and sometimes full-on medieval extracurriculars. So naturally, the church got involved and shut many down. Even if you did want to bathe, it was a full production. You'd need to fetch water from the well, boil it over a fire, fill a wooden tub that leaked, and then pray no one else in the house used it before you. Or worse, after, and rainwater collected in open barrels where birds poop, insects breed, and moss thrives. Sounds refreshing, doesn't it? So whether it's going in your mouth, on your body, or onto your crops, water in the Middle Ages is less of a life source and more of a gamble. One wrong gulp and you're spending your final days sweating in a straw bed, clutching your stomach, and contemplating all your life choices. The next time you sip tap water, raise a glass for our ancestors. They didn't have the luxury of hydration without hazard. Medieval medicine. The cure is worse than the sickness. So you drank the water. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you just stubbed your toe on a rock shaped like disappointment. Either way, you're sick, you need help, you need a doctor. Too bad you live in the Middle Ages, where medicine is really just polite torture with a theology degree. Let's start with the diagnosis. Everything wrong with you, whether it's a hacking cough, a rash, a broken bone, or the creeping plague, is caused by your humors being out of balance. The four humors were blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to medieval science, your health depended on keeping them balanced like some sort of internal soup. Got a fever? Too much blood. The answer? Bloodletting. That's right. The first treatment is to drain your life force into a bowl using a dull blade or a hungry leech. And yes, barbers were often the ones doing it. Imagine getting a haircut and a hemoglobin extraction in one sitting. 2 for 1. Baby, feeling sad or anxious? That's clearly an excess of black bile. The cure? Laxatives, maybe a warm herbal purge, or just prayers and a cold compress while everyone avoids eye contact with you and starts carving your coffin. Now, if you break a bone or get a nasty wound, you're in real trouble. There's no anesthesia, unless you count passing out from pain. Surgery is done with knives that haven't been cleaned. If your condition gets worse, you'll be treated with more leeches, possibly some crushed beetles, and a priest at your bedside giving last rites just in case. At this point, they're preparing for the cure known as death. And if by some miracle you recover, everyone just assumes God took pity on you. The doctor takes full credit, and the leech gets promoted. So yes, in the Middle Ages, medicine is less about healing and more about surviving the cure. Food. The ultimate gamble. After a long day of labor, lice, and leeches, it's finally time to eat. You shuffle back to your hovel, your stomach a cauldron of growls and rumbles, ready for the one joy left in life, a warm meal. But bad news, that meal is probably trying to kill you. Let's begin with the basics. The concept of food preservation as we know it simply doesn't exist. There's no fridge, no freezer, just salt, smoke, or the simple hope that the winter air will keep things fresh enough. Your meat, if you're lucky enough to have any, has been hanging for days, covered in flies, marinated in some questionable brine, and possibly shared with a rat or two. You eat it anyway, you have no other choice. Bread is the cornerstone of the medieval diet, but even that isn't safe. In bad harvest years, desperate peasants bulk it up with bark, sawdust, or even clay to make it stretch. It's not a loaf, it's a brick of grit and despair. And if it's rye season, there's a bonus. Ergot, a fungus that causes convulsions. hallucinations, and sometimes death. It's like eating bread laced with a grim combination of LSD and tetanus. Vegetables? Only if they're in season. And you know what's always in season? Turnips. So many turnips, boiled, mashed, or floating in pottage, which, if you remember, is basically a hot swamp of mystery ingredients that's been simmering since your great-grandfather's funeral. Fruit might be available in the fall, but it rots quickly, and sugar is a rare, expensive commodity hoarded by the rich to show off their blackened teeth. Dairy is another gamble. Fresh milk spoils in hours. Butter and cheese fare better, but they're loaded with bacteria. People eat them anyway because, frankly, it's either that or chew your boot leather. And let's talk about seasoning. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, or nutmeg are worth more than gold. For the average peasant, flavor comes from onions, a bit of salt, if you're lucky, and the sheer pain of survival. Most meals taste like wet burlap sprinkled with sadness. But food isn't just a health hazard, it's a political one. Game animals belong to the Lord, not you. Caught poaching a rabbit? You could be fined, imprisoned, or even executed. That's right, your dinner could get you hanged. So, as you sit down to eat your gray stew by flickering firelight, remember, every bite is a risk, but you eat anyway, because in the Middle Ages, food doesn't nourish, it tests you. Faith and fear. It's evening now. You've worked, suffered, and barely digested your suspicious stew. You might think the day is winding down, but don't get too relaxed, because God is watching. So is the priest, and so is your neighbor Agnes, who will absolutely rat you out if you miss Mass. In medieval Europe, religion isn't just a part of life. It is life. The church controls your calendar, your laws, your education, if you can read, your birth, marriage, death, and everything in between. Think of it as your spiritual landlord. And you're always behind on rent. Every day is structured around prayer bells. The town church bell rings in the morning, at noon, and at night, not because people need reminders, but because missing prayer is a sin. Forget to bow? Sin. Eat meat on a Friday? Sin. Think about your neighbor's wife in that one dream? Double sin. And yes, hell is very real, vividly real. Priests describe it in glorious detail: rivers of fire, lakes of boiling blood, demons with pitchforks, and eternal wailing. If the plague doesn't scare you, eternal damnation definitely will. You can't read the Bible yourself because it's written in Latin, a language reserved for monks, the clergy, and that one noble kid who's too good for dirt. You rely on the church to interpret everything for you. That means if the priest says your crop failure is because you didn't pray hard enough, well, time to kneel harder. Tithes, a tenth of everything you own, are mandatory. If you grow wheat, you give wheat. If you raise chickens, you give eggs. If you have nothing, congratulations, you're spiritually bankrupt and financially doomed. Holidays? They're holy days, dozens of them, and while they offer breaks from labor, they're not for fun. They're for attending Mass, fasting, confessing sins, and reminding yourself that joy is a dangerous indulgence. Questioning the church is dangerous. Heretics are burned, witches are drowned, blasphemers are flogged, and skeptics are quickly reformed. So, you go through the motions. You chant, you bow, you pray that your soul, after enduring this dirt-covered life, might finally land in paradise, assuming the priest likes you. Because in the Middle Ages, God may be merciful, but the church, not so much. The all-encompassing authority. As the sun sets and a fragile darkness falls, your day of toil should be over. But in the medieval world, your day isn't dictated by the sun alone, it's owned by the church. Its authority isn't just about faith, it's a social, political, and economic force that dictates your very existence. The church bell ringing at dawn isn't just a call to prayer, it's your merciless alarm clock, announcing the start of another day of backbreaking labor. The evening bell is a curfew, a reminder that your time is not your own. The air is thick with not just the smell of filth, but with the omnipresent scent of fear. You live in constant dread of sin. Every thought, every action, is measured against a strict set of rules that you don't fully understand. You're told that missing a single Mass could condemn your soul to the fiery pits of hell. The priests, in their flowing robes, paint a vivid and terrifying picture of this afterlife. It's a place of eternal suffering, a fate far worse than the lice, hunger, and disease that define your mortal life. You're a walking, breathing testament to the power of fear. The Bible, the very source of these divine laws, is a closed book to you. Written in Latin, it's an inaccessible text that only the educated clergy can read and interpret. You're utterly dependent on the priest's word, and their word is the law. If a crop fails, it's not due to poor soil or bad harvest. The priest will tell you it's a divine punishment for your lack of faith. Your only recourse is to kneel harder, to pray more, to offer more of what little you have. This fear isn't just for your soul, it's for your wallet too. Tithes, a mandatory tax of 10% of everything you produce. are collected by the church. If you grow wheat, you give wheat. If you raise chickens, you give eggs. If you have nothing, you're financially and spiritually ruined. The church's wealth and power are built on the back of your poverty. Joy is a dangerous thing in this world. Holidays are holy days. A chance to attend mass, fast, and confess your sins. They're not for merriment. They're a reminder that this life is a trial. A fleeting moment of suffering before a potential eternal reward. Questioning the church is a direct path to a brutal end. Heretics are burned at the stake. Witches are drowned in the river. Blasphemers are flogged in the town square. Your only safe bet is to go through the motions, to chant and bow, and to hope that your soul will find a better place. You can only hope that after enduring this dirt-covered existence, your prayers might finally be heard. Because in the Middle Ages, God may be merciful, but the church, most certainly, is not. A woman's burden. If you thought being a medieval peasant was rough, try doing it as a woman. You had all the filth, famine, and fear, plus the unique burdens of childbirth, subservience, and social invisibility. In the Middle Ages, being a woman was like playing life on hard mode, with no health potions and no restart button. From the moment of your birth, a girl's life path was pretty much locked in. Your destiny wasn't to chase a dream, but to fulfill a duty. Marry young, bear children, serve your husband, and die tired. Education? Not a chance, unless you were from a noble family and destined for a convent. Your intellectual development stopped the moment you mastered churning butter and patching a tunic. The world of books and ideas, written in Latin, was an exclusive club you were never invited to join. Marriage was a transaction that happened shockingly early. It wasn't uncommon to be betrothed at 12 and pregnant by 14. This was not about love or companionship, it was about securing land, livestock, and alliances. Your personal feelings were utterly irrelevant. Once married, you were, for all intents and purposes, your husband's property. Your job was a brutal and endless cycle. Produce heirs, feed everyone, keep the house running, and never, ever complain. A complaint might earn you the brand of a nag, or worse, a witch. The latter came with a complimentary drowning or burning, depending on local fashion. Childbirth was a terrifying death lottery. There was no prenatal care, no sterile tools, and no anesthesia. Midwives did their best, but even minor complications could spell death for the mother, the child, or both. It was a common sight to see a woman survive 10 pregnancies, while many others wouldn't make it past their second. And your work didn't end once the baby was born, it increased. You now had a screaming infant in a lice-ridden hut, and were still expected to nurse, cook, clean, and help in the fields. You didn't get a break, you were the break for everyone else. Socially, your existence was tenuous. If you were unmarried, you were suspicious. If you were widowed, you were vulnerable. If you were outspoken, you were dangerous. Women who didn't conform were often accused of witchcraft, especially if they had herbal knowledge, a strong personality, or simply looked at someone funny on a rainy Tuesday. Even within the church, your role was limited. Nuns lived under strict rules with no freedom of movement, and your spiritual worth always ranked below men. In short, if you were a woman in the Middle Ages, you were expected to endure, obey, reproduce, and suffer in silence, ideally while smiling. Because in a time of universal suffering, women were somehow expected to suffer with an added layer of grace. The end of the line: violence and brutality. You've battled filth, starvation, social injustice, and possibly even a goat. But just when you think your day can't get any worse, here comes violence, loud, bloody, and often completely acceptable by medieval standards. Let's be clear, the Middle Ages were not peaceful. The idea of law and order mostly meant, hope the local lord isn't in a bad mood. Violence was everywhere, in the home, in the streets, on the battlefield, in church disputes, and sometimes even in line at the communal bread oven. Crime was common, punishment was brutal, and justice was more of a performance art than a form of protection. Steal a loaf of bread? You could lose a hand. Accused of lying? Your tongue might be pierced. Gossip too much? You might be fitted with a scold's bridle, a metal mask with a bar that fits into your mouth to prevent you from speaking. By being tortured, obviously. Welcome to Trial by Ordeal, a medieval game show where the odds are stacked against you. In one version, you had to stick your hand in boiling water to retrieve a stone. If your hand healed without infection in 3 days, you were innocent. If not, you were guilty. Another option was to be tossed into a river. If you sank, you were innocent and probably dead. If you floated, you were guilty and would be punished anyway. It was a no-win scenario, where the host was actively rooting against you. Even a death sentence was a public event. Executions were performed in front of cheering crowds, with hangings, beheadings, and burnings serving as entertainment. People would even bring snacks, making it the medieval equivalent of cable TV. A society of violence. Domestic violence was considered completely normal, as husbands were allowed and even expected to discipline their wives and children. Street fights were commonplace, and you could be beaten just for looking at a noble's horse the wrong way. War was always simmering, whether through local feuds, territorial disputes, or religious crusades. Someone was always marching off to stab someone else in the name of honor, God, or boredom. Violence wasn't a breakdown of society in the Middle Ages, it was society. Everyone lived with the constant knowledge that life was fragile. Justice was arbitrary, and their neighbor might bash their head in over a pig. So you had to walk carefully, keep your eyes down, and never trust anyone with a club. An unceremonious goodbye. You've made it through the lice, the leeches, the laundry less misery, and the looming threat of public disembowelment. But now comes the final chapter of most medieval lives, an early and unglamorous death. If you're alive and still breathing past the age of 40, you're practically a celebrity. You might even be referred to as the Old One, which is less of a nickname and more of a statistical miracle. Even if you survived childhood, you entered adulthood already exhausted. Work began as soon as you could walk upright, and by 25, your joints creaked like a monastery door. You might be missing several teeth, a finger, and most of your original optimism. The final gauntlet. For women, the deadliest challenge was childbirth. It was one of the leading causes of death. With no prenatal care, sterile tools, or anesthesia, midwives did their best, but even minor complications could mean death for the mother, the child, or both. Some women survived 10 pregnancies, but many didn't survive 2. For men, the dangers were different but equally relentless. They faced farming accidents, infections from minor wounds, a neighbor's drunken rage, or a crusade gone sideways. Even a simple walk to the market could be risky if you crossed paths with a bored bandit or an angry tax collector. Death could also come quietly, such as from the plague which turned cities into cemeteries overnight. It could come from famine, which could last entire seasons, thinning out villages, or it could come from sheer bad luck, like eating spoiled grain and spending your final hours hallucinating and screaming at the walls. And funerals? You were lucky if you got one. Bodies were often buried quickly to avoid disease. There was no embalming, no polished coffins, just a hole, a few murmured prayers, and a shallow mound of earth if there was enough space left in the churchyard. In medieval times, life was brutal, short, and constantly under siege by death in all its casual forms. You didn't retire, you just stopped showing up. And funerals? You were lucky if you got one. Bodies were often buried quickly to avoid disease. There was no embalming, no polished coffins, just a hole, a few murmured prayers, and a shallow mound of earth if there was enough space left in the churchyard. In medieval times, life was brutal, short, and constantly under siege by death in all its casual forms. You didn't retire, you just stopped showing up. A brutal reality. Even the nobles weren't immune to misery. Their castles were drafty stone refrigerators filled with fleas, smoke, and politically motivated marriages. They might have had a fur cloak and a goblet of wine, but they also faced a 50% chance of dying in a skirmish or from an infected splinter. Not exactly luxury living. The simpler times weren't simple at all, they were relentless. Everything took longer, everything hurt more, everything, from childbirth to chewing, came with severe consequences. Life was about survival, not leisure. If you found a quiet moment to think or dream, there wasn't much you could do about it. There was no upward mobility, no modern medicine, and no internet to Google. What's this weird rash? You lived, suffered, worked, and died within a 10-mile radius of where you were born. But because the human spirit is stubborn, even in the darkest chapters, they found a way to make space for light. So tonight, when you slip into your clean bed with indoor plumbing, antibiotics, and central heating, maybe say a quiet thank you to the modern world and to your ancestors who fought rats, famine, and feudalism so you wouldn't have to.